All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife, and this is the TK Pro Nighthawk V2. And so TK Pro is a brand that is associated with tack knives and actually now has been kind of consolidated with and into TACCOM. But the owner of these brands, Shane, reached out to me and asked if I was interested in checking out some of their OTF knives. And this is an out the front automatic knife, as you could probably tell, but I, was definitely interested. I love out the front knives, and I was especially interested when he told me that these are made by Bestech. I actually didn't realize that Bestech made out the front knives, and Bestech does a really good job of OEM, manufacturing for different brands as well as their own, branded knives. And so I was really interested, and I have actually reviewed a few different knives from TK Pro as well as TACCOM, and I'll show you some of them in a little bit here. But this is one that I have had for a while, haven't done a review, but have been using and carrying a lot, probably the most out of these TK Pro or TACCOM knives. And like I said, it's the Nighthawk V2, and it is kind of, not unique, but different than most out the front knives in that it has this face located switch. So rather than the switch being on the edge, like on this HK or on a Microtech Ultratech, or on even, some TACCOM knives like this, the stubby, it is located on the wider, the flat, the face of the handle. And so that really interested in me because I actually had checked out another knife from TK Pro, which is this one here, and it was the first time that I'd gotten to check out a knife with the flat actuator, and I really liked it. This knife is just a little smaller than I typically carry for a modern knife, so I was very interested in this Nighthawk V2. Now, the other thing that interested me in this particular version, because there are other blade shapes, was the blade shape. So this has a dagger style grind, so it's a double edge, or really just a double edge grind, and one side is a typical straight plain edge and the other side is full serrated. Now, of course, there's a little bit of plain edge here up at the top. That almost always is the case with a fully serrated knife, because I think it's just hard to get the serrations all the way to the tip, but you basically get a full serrated edge and a full straight edge. So, one of the things about out the front knives is you can have a double edge blade. So again, like something on this, the stubby, this is actually kind of a bayonet grind, but you can have a double edge blade because the blade is entirely enclosed in the handle, unlike on a normal folding knife, modern folding knife. This is also kind of a dagger style grind, but it isn't a double edge knife because you'd cut yourself every time you grabbed it. This is the TACRAY T01, and I love the aesthetics of a dagger style blade, but on a typical folding knife you often can't have a double edge, whereas again you can on an out the front because the blade is completely enclosed in the handle. But there's actually, some downsides to that. When you have a double edge, it means that the grind is shorter, so it's not as tall a grind. So usually it can't be ground quite as thin, quite as good for slicing. And that's definitely true on this also. This isn't gonna be, a super duper slicey, knife. It's not gonna be super thin like, something like a Spyderco, Police 4 lightweight, or even one of the sliciest knives I have, another TACRAY here. This is the TACRAY DT03. Super slicey, but you can see that it has a really tall blade. So if we compare the width, from edge to edge here and spine to edge here, it's very different. So that allows for a taller and therefore thinner grind. Now that said, this particular double edge adds some utility, in my opinion and in my use, in that it is that dual edge. So it's not just two straight edges, it's a plain edge and a serrated edge. A lot of people these days don't like serrated edges, particularly knife enthusiasts, where I think still a lot of non-enthusiasts, people that just want a knife, do like serrated edges because they typically will cut a little longer, especially if you're doing kind of rough cutting. So The reason for that, at least in my understanding, is that the tips of the serrations will dull and kind of hit any hard edges, like if you're cutting on plate or on metal or something like that. And then the hollows will, not hit those things and stay sharp. The other thing though about a serrated edge is it is a little bit of a different type of cutting. It's more of like a pulling and catching cut versus like a slicing cut with a straight edge. And I found it to be really useful. I actually, despite how this knife looks, used it in the garden quite a bit, because this serrated edge for me was really good for cutting weeds, harvesting things from the garden, just really good pull cutting, catches on fibrous material and things like that. So I found it to be really useful. It gives you twice the edge, so you will hold an edge longer. You'll be able to have a sharp edge longer. Now, speaking of that, this is 154 cm steel, so it's a classic American steel, not necessarily a super steel at this point, not trendy, and I know people have kind of talked down on it in my videos on TacCom knives or TK Pro knives. But I think it works fine. I have no issue with it. I wouldn't call myself a steel snob or a steel aficionado. I appreciate good steel, but for me, this 154 cm and really other 154 cm, like ProTech up until recently was like almost exclusively used 154 cm. Now they're using MagnaCut and things like that. But I have good experiences with 154 cm, both on these TK Pro knives and knives from other brands. So I have no problem with it. Moving on to the quality of this knife. That's one thing that I really, have emphasized in my videos on these TK Pro knives. And again, Bestech does a great job with their other OEM, knives that they manufacture, but they do a really, really good job on these out the front knives. So there is very, very little play. Now there is play. All out the front knives except for like the Hawk Deadlock has play, which is actually really amazing. I got to check one out at Blade Show and it was completely without any play. But all out the front knives do have play basically. And there is some, so you can probably hear it. But, again, comparing to an Ultratech, I would say it's really comparable. It's not more, I wouldn't say it's less necessarily, maybe different in how it feels. But I would say it's comparable, maybe just ever so slightly more than this Ultratech. But this Ultratech is also newer. Compared to this HK made by Hogue Incursion, I would say that it has about the same, maybe slightly less. And then compared to my Axial Shift, it definitely has less than the Shift. I gotta be honest about that. The TK Pro stuff has less blade play than my Shift out the front knives have. So it's really impressively made. The only knife really that has significantly less play or out the front knife is this TacCom, which is a a higher price knife from this newer TacCom brand. So this one does have a little less and is really, really solid. But I have been really, really impressed with the build quality of these TK Pro knives. Now, as for the design itself, it's a pretty simple design, and honestly, I like that. If you watch my videos, I think a simple handle makes for an ergonomic handle. And so, unfortunately, this HK Incursion, I actually really like the ergonomics of the Micro Incursion. Don't like them as much on this, and this bump is what gets in the way. You don't have any of that type of thing on this. This is pretty much just a straight handle. The only thing that even makes it non-symmetrical is the fact that this corner is towards the top here. And I asked Shane why that was, why not make it completely symmetrical? And he said, some of the other blade shapes are not double-edged, and he thinks it looks better. So, that's just a design choice. But speaking of being symmetrical, one really cool thing about these flat switch out the front knives with a double edge is that they are ambidextrous. And I never say that right. I'm not going to try to say it right. You know what I mean. You can use it with both hands. And the reason for that is because if you put this in your right pocket, pull it out, you can open it, and you've got an edge. If you put it in your left pocket, pull it out, open it, you've got an edge. So it is truly ambidextrous, without having to switch the clip. So I think that that's a value. I know I have a friend who recently started a knife channel that is left-handed, so I'll put a link to his new channel in the description. But you know, that's something that could be really useful for left-handed people. But really overall, I just really like this knife. I think it's a really good knife. These are about $180. You can use the code Nighthawks and get a discount there at TacCom. So definitely do that. And you know, this is a really, really well-made knife. You know, it is made overseas, it is made in China, but you can compare like about $250, $270 for an HK, $300 basically plus for a Microtech, $300 plus for a Benchmade, $270 or so for an Axial if you can get it. Now I like all those other knives that I just showed, but it's just if you want a really well-made knife, don't care where it's made or don't care that it's made in China, and want to, you know, spend a little bit less, this is a great option. I am really impressed by these knives. I still carry and use this one pretty frequently and just really enjoy it. So I want to say thank you to Shane for sending this knife for review. Like I said, if you do decide to pick up a TK Pro or TacCom knife, make sure you use the code Nighthawks, and that'll get you a discount there. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.